Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Gender-affirming therapy. You say, what is that? Planned Parenthood is now offering hormones to young people with no questions asked. They simply say, quote, I'm transgender, I want the hormones, and voila. How much should this new business venture benefit Planned Parenthood? And how are they targeting children as young as 16 and under? Heather Sells brings us this shocking report.
Planned Parenthood has begun offering hormone therapy to those who identify as transgender. It is a new business model that makes financial sense, potentially for years to come.
You are accepting all the risk, and you say, I'm transgender, I want these hormones, and they will give them to you.
Attorney Mary Hassan is watching the growing number of young people, especially girls, who see themselves either as transgender or simply gender nonconforming, filling Planned Parenthood waiting rooms.
They seek hormones to modify their bodies, not to the extent that someone who identifies as transgender might, but just, for example, for a girl to have less fat, to have more musculature, to look a little bit more masculine.
The giant abortion provider's annual report shows its expanding business venture. 200 centers in 31 states now welcome these young people, and the Family Research Council says Planned Parenthood has become the second largest provider of hormone therapy to those wanting to change. It is labeled gender-affirming therapy, which means no questions asked and no need for mental health support.
Instead of their underlying wounds being addressed and someone sorting out why it is that it feels so terrible to be a woman and that they hate their bodies and instead of asking what's going on, they're simply medicating that and creating new customers for life in ways that are deeply damaging to these women's bodies.
Some centers are even targeting teens 16 and under, setting up a business relationship that can last for a lifetime and permanently alter adolescent bodies. Heather Sells, CBN News.
You know, the founder of Planned Parenthood is a lady named Margaret Sanger, and she was unbelievably evil. She wrote a book, and I read the monograph, so don't tell me that it's not true. I've read it, called Breeding the Thoroughbred. And what she wanted to do was to sterilize mentally defectives. She wanted to sterilize Southern European people. She wanted to sterilize certain Protestants. And then, of course, she wanted to sterilize black people. Now, that was her agenda. And Planned Parenthood, as Margaret Sanger was the founder of what was called eugenics. And I thought that she'd taken her material from Adolf Hitler. It's the other way around. Hitler took his stuff from Margaret Sanger. And she was the founder of Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood has gotten so pervasive, it's gotten so much money from the federal government that Barack Obama, during his presidency, in a showdown with Congress, was willing to shut the government down rather than eliminate the subsidies being paid to Planned Parenthood. And you've got to go all the way through the federal budget to find out all those items. But it amounts to at least $100 million, maybe more than that, being paid by the federal government to Planned Parenthood. It is an absolutely pernicious, evil organization, and this founder was, well, words fail to me to describe the kind of person she was. But nevertheless, they're getting all this money, and this is a new stream of money, that is going to take little children, youngsters, boys and girls, and change their sex without any questions being asked. Well, in other news, South Dakota's governor is under fire for vetoing a law protecting women's sports. The legislature overturned her veto. So what did she do next? John Jessup has that.
That is right, Pat. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem is resorting to using her executive privilege to keep transgender males from competing in women's sports in public schools and colleges. One order limits participation in women's sports to females based on their biological sex from K through 12. The other addresses the issue on the college level. Noem announced the orders after the state's Republican legislature overrode her veto of a bill designed to protect women's sports on Monday. Noem said the bill didn't do enough to protect college athletes, but she faced harsh criticism from conservatives over her vote. Before Monday's events, CBN's David Brody asked the Republican governor whether she sent the bill back after corporate pressure from the NCAA and Amazon.
If this bill was just a K through 12 bill, you would sign it, but the problem is the college component here, because the NCAA may sue the state or maybe take their business elsewhere.
Only girls should be playing in girls' sports. That's not up for dispute. My goal is really to protect our kids, make sure that we don't have boys playing in girls' sports at the K-12 level, and then also at the collegiate level, go fight a battle that we can win.
Noem signed the orders within an hour of the legislature's override. Well, 9 minutes of terror. That's how the prosecutor described George Floyd's last moments in the first day of the trial of former police officer Derek Chauvin. But the defense attorney argues the defendant did nothing wrong. CBN's Jenna Browder has the latest on the highly charged trial.
After opening statements, the prosecution began calling witnesses, one of them a 911 operator who saw the entire incident unfold.
The fact that you guys aren't checking his pulse and doing compressions if he needs that.
Prosecutor Jerry Blackwell laid out his case, starting with bystander video showing the final minutes of George Floyd's life. Blackwell placing all blame for Floyd's death on Officer Chauvin, who knelt on the victim's neck for more than 9 minutes.
Mr. Derek Chauvin betrayed this badge when he used excessive and unreasonable force upon the body of Mr. George Floyd.
But defense attorney Eric Nelson making a case for reasonable doubt in his opening statement, arguing officers struggled to constrain Floyd and highlighting his drug use and underlying health conditions.
The evidence will show that Mr. Floyd died of a cardiac arrhythmia that occurred as a result of hypertension, his coronary disease, the ingestion of methamphetamine and fentanyl, and the adrenaline flowing through his body.
The prosecution then put its opening witnesses on the stand.
He was going through distress because of the knee, and he vocalized it that I can't breathe, I need to get up, and I'm sorry.
The 911 operator also testifying, saying she watched the incident unfold on street camera, later reporting it to a supervisor.
My instincts were telling me that something's wrong. Something is not right. I don't know what, but something wasn't right.
Ultimately, it comes down to 14 jurors, 8 white and 6 black or multiracial will hear this case, which is expected to last up to 4 weeks. And there's concern the trial could spark violent protests. That's why some 100 National Guard members are standing by in Minneapolis. Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thank you, Jenna. Pat, back to you.
You know, we have a principle in law that a person is innocent until proved guilty. And I certainly agree with that. But I tell you what this Chauvin did, it was so blatant, it was so ungodly, and it went on for interminable time. And it was all played out on television, and it has resulted in tens of millions of dollars worth of damage against goods and property. It's resulted in rioting all across America. It has set the cause of race relations back, decades, and it was all because of this one bad cop. And in my opinion, they ought to not put him in jail, but put him under the jail. I mean, what he did was just horrible. But as I say, the principle of law is he's innocent until proved guilty, but the defense is putting up a pretty good case. And, even if Floyd had pre-existing conditions, if he had fentanyl in his system, whatever he had, that wasn't the cause of his death, it doesn't seem. And Chauvin, I mean, he has cost us as a nation dearly, and there's just no punishment that I think is adequate to take care of what he's done. John?
Pat, some good news in the fight against COVID-19. A real-world study shows the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are 90% effective. And just one dose of either provides 80% effectiveness in preventing infections from the virus, according to a CDC study. The U.S. is now vaccinating between 2 to 3 million people daily. This as the Biden administration is warning people not to drop their guard. Cases are rising nationwide, prompting concerns about a fourth surge. However, some states that lifted restrictions are not seeing an increase in cases. In Texas, for example, where the governor opened the state and lifted mask restrictions last month, cases are dropping to a record low over the past 3 weeks, down more than 42%. Well, neither President Biden nor Vice President Harris have visited the border, but Republican lawmakers are making the trip, and they're blaming the president's immigration policies for the surge. Texas Republican Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne spoke with CBN's Faith Nation from the border. Congresswoman Van Dyne, have you been able to meet with Border Patrol agents or other law enforcement officials? I wonder what they're telling you.
We have. We have talked to them, and they are very direct that they feel like they are in reactionary mode, that, under the Trump administration, we were able to get a handle on what was happening by allowing people to apply for asylum in Mexico or the first safe country they came in, instead of having this massive surge onto our border. And what we've seen under this current Biden administration is all of those solutions that worked under the last administration, the Trump administration, have been removed.
More than 17,000 unaccompanied minors who crossed the border alone are now in U.S. custody. Senator Lindsey Graham visited the border over the weekend. He told Fox's Sean Hannity how the current policies are enticing people to send children to the border alone.
I saw children with numbers on their wrist, and here's what that means. They have family members in the United States, Sean. They send money back to Central America. They hire a human smuggler, human trafficker to get them to the border. Once we catch them, your tax dollars are used to reunite the family. This is not catch and release. This is catch and reunite.
The Biden administration says it is sending the message to people in Central and South America not to come to the southern border. Still, predictions, Pat, are that as we come into the spring and summer months, the numbers will only increase.
Well, this business about, well, it's just spiking because it's warm weather is nonsense. I mean, that area down there is warm all the time. And I think it's ridiculous to talk about that. But there is no question that these people are coming because they think Joe Biden has invited them. And unless Joe Biden says you can't come, and if you do come, you're going to be sent back home, and then he tells the Mexicans, as they have in the past, that they themselves won't allow the people to transition from Honduras or El Salvador across their territory. And if they say that, then the thing will stop. But we cannot accommodate this enormous surge. Some of them are actually being put up in expensive hotels at government expense. And what Lindsey Graham said about the taxpayer, it's not just the taxpayer. The cartels are bringing these people across, putting a label on them, finding out information about their families, and then threatening their families when they come in. They'll know who they are, where they are, and they'll say, if you don't pay us or do whatever we will ask you to do, we'll kill you. I mean, so the cartels are reaching into America because of this stuff that's going on. It's not just the taxpayers paying the bill. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot allow our federal government to do what they're doing to us, because it's affecting every one of us. And when these people come into these communities, they're being shipped into all across the country in buses, and they turn them loose, and they're going to be in various cities throughout Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and then all the way up into the Middle West, and then all over the country. And thanks to our current president. Why? Well, they think, number one, the big companies want cheap labor, number one, and that holds the cost of labor down. Number two, they think that these people can be made to vote for the Democrat Party, and therefore they want to have more of them in here. And then they want to give them status, they want to give them citizenship, they want to give them protection, and then they want to give them health care. And before it's finished, they want to give them free tuition in our colleges. unbelievable. We cannot afford it. John?
Pat, the international shipping saga is over now that shipping is once again moving in the Suez Canal. Salvage teams freed the massive container ship Monday that brought much of the world's trade to a standstill. A high tide enhanced by a supermoon helped finally break the 220,000-ton ship loose after being stuck for nearly a week. The delay cost companies billions of dollars. Well, it was an incredible Cinderella story for Oral Roberts University's basketball team during this year's March Madness. Even though the Golden Eagles were beaten in the Sweet 16 last weekend, University President William Wilson says the staff and students are grateful for the experience. He says even when it was overshadowed by a cancel culture call for the NCAA to oust the school over its stand on biblical sexuality, the school's focus remained on what's always mattered most.
Our views on these issues are nothing new. We've been around for over 50 years, and we're committed to having a culture and an ethos at ORU grounded in the Word of God and one that gives our students the very best chance for success. So we're grateful, we're thankful. We don't expect everybody to agree with us. There's room in America for diverse opinions. We accept that, and we appreciate people respecting our opinion and not being religiously discriminate against us.
The Final Four starts this weekend, and Pat, it was such a close game, just down by 2 points.
It's amazing what they've done. The Green family of Hobby Lobby have given an enormous amount of money to Oral Roberts University. It's in the neighborhood of $350 million or so. And they rescued the school. The school was going down. It was, you know, when Oral left, you know, there was confusion, tremendous amount of debt and so forth. And it's been rescued and turned around. But the idea that we have a culture now where people would come against a school, why? Because they do not agree with homosexuality, lesbianism, and transgender activities. And because they don't do that, they should be prohibited from engaging in sporting activity because of the policies of the school. Now, that's how far we've gone. It wasn't long ago, I mean a few decades ago, when this type of conduct that they're advocating was actually considered a pathology, and it was a psychological pathology. Now the circle has come around so that those people are now the oppressors. And if you don't agree with them, they will destroy your activity. It's not a question of live and let live. It's a question of you agree with us or we will take you down. And that's what was being advocated against ORU. So my salute and hats off to them. Keep with your policies, and there are millions of people in America who agree with what you're doing, agree with biblical values, and we're not going to let the thought police destroy you. So great work in the Sweet 16. I mean, that's a Cinderella story of major magnitude. Congratulations to ORU. I was once, they had the President's Council out there, and I was chairman of that years and years ago when Oral was running the school, and they were just starting out. And it was a thrill to see what they were doing at ORU in those early days. I was there at the early days when the school was just getting going. And, you know, I'm glad to see them. You know, Oral, it was amazing. In those days, he was out recruiting tall basketball players. You see these seven. It's paid off. You see. So I mean, that was Oral's policy years and years ago. He didn't field a football team, but he went for basketball, and he would go out and, I mean, literally go to a house where these people were, and he'd pray with the mother and say, "You've got to send your son to ORU." And the mother will say, "Well, Reverend Roberts was in to see me. I've got to get my boy to come to your school." I mean, you talk about recruiting, it was amazing. But anyhow, congratulations.